Welcome to the Hashimoto's Doctor Podcast. You're now part of a growing community of people determined to take their health back through education and self-empowerment. But because of the healthcare system today, we don't have access to the types of healthcare that we want. So we have to do things differently. We've got to do things smarter, and we do that by becoming our own advocates. This podcast will give you the perspective and thoughts of one of the world's leading Hashimoto's doctors. So let's get started. Hey guys, Dr. Shook here. I hope you're doing well today. In today's podcast, what I want to talk to you guys about is, a really important topic because there are a lot of people today that are getting Botox injections. They're using facial fillers to help smooth their lines, right? Make their skin look better. And, I understand the desire to want to do that. And up until rather recently, I really didn't have an opinion. I just thought, okay, that's whatever you want to do. It's not hurting anyone, and I have no reason to advocate that you don't do it. So I had no position on it. But what's been discovered recently is that the botulinum toxin, which is what Botox is it basically destroys the nerve temporarily. It paralyzes it basically, and it paralyzes the muscle, and so it causes you to not be able to contract the muscles in that area of your face, and therefore you don't express those lines, those small lines, or the lines in your skin that you're seeing. So, it sounds okay, but there's a lot of potential problems, guys. So the first and biggest problem that I see with it, and this is, debatable depending on what happens, because there are multiple things I'm going to share with you guys that are potential risks of Botox and even fillers. I want to talk about fillers a little bit because sometimes they're used as an alternative. But with Botox in particular, the botulinum toxin, which is the active, it's what's in the injections that paralyzes the muscle. What they found is that it will contribute, and it can contribute to autoimmunity against the thyroid. Now, there's some of and there's a paper. I'll post a link and try to put it in our show description. But I'll post a link to a paper that was published on PubMed, which is where all the best peer-reviewed, indexed medical literature is found, and you can go there and you can search, but you can probably search botulinum toxin or Botox injections and thyroiditis or Hashimoto's. I know whenever because I first heard about this and then I started searching, and it took me a little bit of time to find it on there, but I eventually found it. So I'll try to post a link, like I said, in our show notes. If not, I'll definitely have it on Facebook, and if you guys message us, we will dig it up for you, but I promise you it's there. And it basically showed that there was this possibility of cross-reactivity, or it promoted basically an immune attack against the thyroid gland. So it could. So the thing is that this is not a well-understood risk factor. And there are a lot of people giving Botox injections for number one that are not doctors, that don't really understand a lot of these potential risks. And there are a lot of other risks, but this is one that's especially important to people that are, that follow me, and because people that I work with and that I talk to, a lot of them have Hashimoto's, right? You have an autoimmune thyroid condition, and this is much more relevant to you because it's found to, potentially contribute to further autoimmune attack against the thyroid itself. So this is a really, really important finding. So if you're getting Botox injections, if you're thinking about it, and especially if you have Hashimoto's already, this is something to really, think it through, because you might be getting an injection that has the potential to exacerbate an immune attack against your thyroid, okay? So it's really an important thing to keep in mind. Now, there are a lot of other potential problems here that we need to talk about. So one of the things in particular that is, I found really interesting was that, and this is in a mouse model, guys, because we can't do these studies on humans, because you'll understand why. In a mouse model, what they did was scientists gave Botox injections to the mice, and what they found was, and this was facial, and then I believe they also did some that were intracranial. But what they found was, and I can tell you, I can look at it, I wrote it down here. It was really an interesting find, I thought. What they said was that they injected it into one side of the brain. Okay, so they injected it on one side of the brain. This was in a mouse model. And that what they did was they found that when they injected it into their whiskers, okay, so this was not actually in the brain, but they were measuring levels of the botulinum toxin in the brain. When they injected it into the whiskers of a mouse, that it was found that it made its way into the brain. That's the main thing you need to keep in mind here. So when it was injected into, outside of the skull, and it was in a whisker of a mouse, that it made its way into the brain. Now remember, this stuff paralyzes neurons so that they cannot cause a firing of the muscle, so you get no facial contraction, so you don't see the lines. But guess what your brain is? It's just a huge ball of neurons, right? It's a huge network of these nerve cells. So if it's making its way into the brain of a mouse, could that be happening to us? This is they used a more potent form. It raises concerns. This is obviously in a mouse model, but it's really important for us to look at this and think about what we're doing to ourselves, right? We don't know exactly what this stuff is going to do, and how much it might be contributing to other problems. And so we've got to really, guys, it's always risk benefit, weighing the risk and benefit to determine, if something is really a good idea or not. So that's one thing that I thought was really important to share with you guys too, that these mice had these injections in their whiskers and that the Botox made its way into the brain. So what kind of impact, if that's happening to us as humans, could that be causing, right? What could that be? How could that be affecting our brain? All right, so that's one thing. Now, the other thing is that they found that Botox, what it does, so it paralyzes the nerves in the skin, or it paralyzes the muscles by basically temporarily disabling the nerve, is what it comes down to. And so the muscle can't contract. So when your facial muscles can't contract and they're paralyzed and they're still, when you smile, when you move, when you would normally have a facial expression, those muscles don't move. There are nerve endings inside those muscles, inside the skin, in those areas that are paralyzed, that are not getting stimulated. Okay? When those areas are not stimulated, they do not fire their signal to the brain. And guess what? When they don't fire their signal to the brain, that area of the brain itself does not get activated neurologically, because those are sensory nerves that are not getting activated. Sensory meaning that they are listening to the environment. When the face contracts, they feel the pressure and change in pressure as the skin is shaped and moved differently due to the muscles contracting underneath. If those muscles cannot move, those nerves do not get fired. They do not send signals to the brain that any facial expression is occurring, and therefore an entire region of the brain does not get lit up electrically. When you don't use it, my friends, you lose it. And see, so our nervous system is a network of neurons and nerve cells that integrate. They integrate, meaning when one fires, they have an impact on surrounding nerve cell or neuron pools that it all integrates. It all is connected. So this, the act of smiling or frowning or crying, it all tells your brain something that's happening based on everything that's going on. Not just your perception of a mood. No, it's the perception of the mood plus a facial expression plus all of these other things that are going on changes the expression and the electrical activity of the brain. So when you paralyze muscles, you're telling the brain a different story. And how does that change? Well, what researchers found was that when they paralyzed, and when someone had Botox and it paralyzed these muscles in the face, that what they found was that they believe that it may diminish a person's ability to read the emotions of someone else. Okay, so this is really interesting because when you start looking at this, they said that, and this was a 2011 study, it found that people who had Botox injections were less able to read the emotions of others compared to those who had non-paralyzing fillers used to smooth their wrinkles instead. So we're looking at people that have had Botox, and they looked at people who had fillers that did not paralyze the muscles. And they found that the people who had the fillers were able to read the emotions of others. So you would think, and I think it's true, that you cannot read the expression of people that have had Botox. You can't, because they cannot, and they do not have that facial expression, that you cannot read their emotions. But what this study shows is that the people that have had it cannot read the emotions of others. So they may have less empathy, right? Less of an ability to care and have emotions with you. So it's a very interesting thing. And another study, another thing that I think is really interesting is another study showed that it even suggested to us that the Botox makes it more difficult for a person to feel their own emotions. It's really interesting, right? I just mentioned to you that the entire experience of an emotion, when you look at it on a neurological level, you look at what's going on in the brain, everything comes into the brain through sensory, this sensory nerves, and it's feeding into the brain. It's not just your perception of it, it's also what is happening to your body. Your facial expressions, if you're crying, how your forehead furrows and your eyes tighten up, and you have tears, all those things, all of these neurological things happening at once, that your brain is feeding into your brain and letting your brain perceive this, perceive what's happening. But it's when you take that away, you lose some of the integration of the neurological signals. And that doesn't make sense. All you need to know is that you're changing the way that you perceive the world. You're changing the way your brain perceives the world by paralyzing. It's just not natural. I mean, it's just not natural, and it changes a lot of stuff that you take for granted. A lot of times we think that what we're doing is, it's just paralyzing the muscle temporarily. Well, what does that really mean? What does that really mean? What does that mean immunologically, which we just talked about, how there's research showing that it could potentially trigger autoimmunity and autoimmune thyroid flare-ups. There's this research that shows loss of empathy, potential loss of empathy, where you can't perceive other people's emotions. Loss of ability to really be able to identify your own feelings. All these things, it's just unbelievable. There's a ton of other research studies here that I think are amazing. And I want to just mention something about these fillers. So let's say, so I don't want to do Botox, but I'll use a filler. Well, the fillers have risks too, guys. They do. They have their own risks. I mean, there are, worst case scenarios where this stuff can actually block blood flow to the eyes. That's right. It can block blood flow to the eyes, and it could cause problems where there's blindness. And in worst case scenarios, it could create a problem where it may make its way into an artery that supplies blood to the brain, and it could cause a stroke because it could find its way into the bloodstream, travel through the bloodstream, and block the flow of a vessel and cause loss of blood to a region of the brain, and it causes a stroke. And that's something that has been documented. There have been 4 reported incidences of strokes by fillers, and there are over 50 reported cases of blindness due to fillers. So this is something that I know a lot of you, I'll tell you, the people that are doing these procedures with you have no idea of these risks. They're not familiar with them. And I mean, there are millions of people who use these products and these techniques. So I mean, relatively speaking, as a percentage, it's probably, it's pretty small, but it's a risk that you need to be aware of. And there are a lot of things that I think are probably underreported, because if people don't even know that this is a potential risk, they have these procedures or these things done, and let's say they have a stroke or there's blindness or something. Well, are they going to know that it's a filler, or that it's something, or they have a flare up of their autoimmunity, or it triggers, they have Hashimoto's? Is that something that they're going to associate with that? And it's really hard to find associations sometimes, and so anyway, this is something that's probably very, very much underreported, because if it occurs, no one attributes it to the procedure they had, right? So I hope that makes sense. So, I guess really I wanted to share this with you guys, especially for the autoimmune component with Botox. But it's really, it's the other thing to keep in mind here is that a lot of Botox users have reported, a lot of other signs and symptoms. And some people have, they allege that, the Botox caused brain injury, persistent chronic pain, double vision, breathing problems, all kinds of stuff. So just know that, we don't know enough about this yet, but there are a lot of potential risks here that we want to take into consideration. So, what I really wanted to share with you guys is this information. I wanted to tell you about Public Citizen. You can Google Public Citizen. They're basically a watchdog group. And what they found was that during a 10-year period that there were reports linked to Botox, there were 180 life-threatening conditions that were reported. 87 hospitalizations, 16 deaths. Okay? You can go to Public Citizen. It's a watchdog group, and you can look up Botox. And they have, they're trying to, make people aware of potential risks that could be going on here. And the main factor here is that it's believed that this is occurring because of, primarily because of lack of regulation. And, like I said, underreporting, because people just are not aware of these potential side effects. So I know it's not easy to just, look at yourself as you get older and as your age, as time goes by. I can personally, relate to that. When I was about 14, I had pretty bad acne. And, looking back with what I know today, I'm sure that the majority of it was diet. And, I had all kinds of issues. Like a lot of you guys know, at 6, I was diagnosed with ADHD. At 12, it was irritable bowel syndrome with constipation that lasted for probably 6 to 8 years. It was severe at times. It was a terrible time for me. And then 25, psoriasis, 34, autoimmune thyroid problems. So I've lived with my own problems. And, until, pretty recently, I didn't have the information that I needed to really help myself put these things into remission and get a real true hold of the drivers of these problems with my own health. So when I was at a young age, at 14, and I had acne, I had no idea that the junk and everything that I was eating that I thought was good was probably contributing to that. So, I went to dermatologists, and they gave me all kinds of things and recommended all kinds of things that did a lot of damage to my skin. Quite frankly, I used, I don't know how much I can say about different brands here, so I'm not going to mention it, but I used topical gels that were designed to, help my acne. And guess what? They did, but guess what? They said, you have to wash it off of your skin thoroughly before you go outside. I used benzoyl peroxide, which is over the counter that you can find. There's different brands that have it. And it was a face wash, and this stuff, I washed my skin thoroughly. Like I would wash my face with it, and then I would wash it off really, really well. How much more can I wash it? And then but what would happen is it would end up bleaching the collars of my shirts. So all my polo shirts, I would come home and I'd be like, after, a few weeks of wearing them, my mom would say, "Hey, what's going on with the collar of your shirt?" And it would have this light color to it, and we'd start fading. And I was like, I don't know. And what we figured out was that on my neck and my face, that stuff was still there, that benzoyl peroxide, and the prescriptive things that they gave us, and all the other medications that sensitize my skin to sun damage. So now I have, as I'm getting older, I'm seeing it a lot more. I have very significant skin damage on my face and sun damage, and it's due to these medications. So I'm telling you now that I understand, I look at that and I'm like, well, it is what it is. You just wear it and you do what, and I don't, it doesn't bother me that much. Sometimes people will ask me, like, why don't you go and do something about that? And I'm like, well, I have gone to the dermatologist, and I've already been down that road, and that's what got me in the boat that I'm in. I use lotions, potions, creams that were designed to help me short term, but did not take into consideration, it was not shared with me, the risks, and I didn't, I wasn't educated. If there was a way that I should have been washing my face or doing something to get that stuff off, that was other than using soap and water, it was never conveyed to me. And now I live with the consequences of that as I get older. Predisposes me to a lot of other problems. So I wear it, and I'm like, I've been to dermatologists, and I know what they want to do. They want me to put whitening creams and things that are further going to sensitize the skin to further damage. They want me to use laser therapies and other things. They want me to do all these things that contribute further to the problem. In my opinion, it's a short-term fix for a long-term problem. You know what I said? I'm going to let my body do what my body does. And I'm going to let it adapt to the environment, and I'm going to give it everything I can to be healthy. And it is what it is. I live with it. I'm not, that's that part of that vanity. It is what it is. So I understand your desires to want to have more youthful looking skin. I'm done chasing youth. I'm done chasing that vanity. I have the people in my life I love. I am what I am. I am who I am. And I'm content with that. And I'm not trying to sit here and judge you if you're not. Okay? It's just where I am in my life. I've got a greater mission. It's to try to make this world a better place before I'm done here. Show my children that you can make a difference, that you can help a lot of people. Be a good role model for them and others. And, be here for the people that I love and for the people that need help. And that's what I think life's about. And I realize it's hard to see that sometimes because it takes, you got to have, if you don't have those people that care about you in your life, then it makes it a lot harder to get to a place where you can make those statements and you can say, okay, I'm okay with where I'm at. I'm okay with who I am. So anyway, I digress a bit, but I can relate to a lot of this stuff. So I just want to let you guys know, you're not alone if you feel like you need to do that stuff. But anyway, guys, hope this helps you to better understand some of these challenges. I just want you guys to have information to make more educated decisions and help yourself. But I appreciate you. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Talk to you guys again soon. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out behind the scenes with Dr. Shook. You can also talk with and learn from Dr. Shook through Facebook Live on our Facebook page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. Don't forget, you can also get access to our videos, guidebooks, and thyroid programs at www.drbradshook.com. Oh yeah, and don't forget one more thing. We can change the world one person, one family, and one community at a time. Until next time, remember, today is your day, and no one will tell you who you are and what you can be.